let's get to the reason we're here. I want to introduce my friend Marty Cagan. He's the founder of Silicon Valley Product Group. He's been doing that for a while. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Silicon Valley Product Group. Before that, he was a product leader at eBay, Netscape. He worked at HP. His two books, Inspired, which has a first edition and a second edition, and Empowered, which came out about a year ago, are very popular. I'm sure everybody here already has a copy, but 85 of you now have new copies. You can go to svpg.com and you can find him on Twitter at Cagan. And today he's going to be sharing his advice on Straight Talk About Product Ops, which is a new area within product management. So Marty, with that, welcome and please take it away.
All right. Good to see everybody for sure. And Dan, thanks again. Dan knows I really do like his group he's built. Of course, I do miss the in-person right there. A long time affection for Intuit and Scott Cook. And it's just, I love going there and I can't wait till we can do that again in person, hopefully next January, Dan. But until then, so there's always lots of stuff going on in product. And I had actually been holding off talking and writing about product ops for a while. Honestly, I'm probably at least 6 months from when I told myself I wanted to write about it. The reason I kept holding off was I kept meeting other teams that were defining product ops totally differently. And I was just, from the beginning, there was confusion, don't get me wrong, but the confusion just seems to be getting worse and worse. And so anyway, finally, I had to just say, look, the longer I just keep talking to people about how they define product ops, it seems the more definitions I find. So at some point, I just need to kind of say, all right, so far, here are the major ones I've seen. Now, some of the definitions I really like. I think like, this is helpful. This is good. I should, share this. Other definitions, I'm like, oh no, this is just the same old problem with a new name. And so obviously I have opinions like most of you probably do on which definitions are better than or worse. So I'm going to talk about the main ones I've found, 6 different ones. And Dan, if you wouldn't mind, maybe you could share a link to I published an article.
Yes.
You've got it. I know it's just
I'll get it. Yeah.
Most current one, but I'm not going to repeat that, but it's quite a long article. I decided to write this sort of survey article that talks about all the major types I found, my opinions about each. And I also told people, I encourage people that if their company defines it yet in another way, to let me know. And I did, after I published it, which was a few weeks ago, I heard from several companies. Now, so far, I haven't actually got a distinctly new definition that I need to add. It's like 7th, 8th, 9th, but I have got several hybrids. There are definitely people that are hybrids. They're a little bit of one and a little bit of another. So the area is still, largely in flux. I'm hoping by sharing some opinions about which ones I think are really helpful and giving my reasons why, that we'll start to see some more convergence on the good side. The reason what prompted me to finally sort of go on the record about these opinions is that some of the ones that I consider very toxic to a strong product company are taking off. And, I'm not surprised. Companies are always, they're kind of like, it's a slippery slope and it's very easy to slide off that and, head in the wrong direction. So I thought, well, you really need to shine a light on this so that at least if people make that choice to go in that direction, they're at least conscious, it's an intentional choice. It's like, yes, I know this is the risk. I still think we should do it. So anyway, it's a broad topic. I want to, I'd encourage you, if you're interested, read the article. Dan just shared it there. You can read the article. It takes a bit of time because it's quite long. My initial plan was to write about each of those different definitions separately. But what I found was that I wrote about the first definition, and then everybody thought that's what I thought product ops was. They didn't read the parts that said lots more coming. So I realized this is just creating more confusion. So I just published the summary. So that said, I just want to kind of quickly talk about those patterns, those 6 different patterns. But my real hope for this talk is I think this talk goes way beyond product ops. Product ops is really just a symptom of some deeper topics. When I say product ops, I'm talking about the sort of the bad patterns of product ops are symptoms of a deeper issue, 2 deeper issues actually. And so what this talk will really be about is, after I go through those 6, I want to talk about those 2 bigger issues, the kind that I know I need to write more about, I know I need to talk more about, but they're very difficult topics. And honestly, I'm still working for the right metaphors to kind of explain why. These are kind of topics that are a lot easier to do face to face with a whiteboard. We could just sort of talk through your specific instance, but I'm always working on trying to take the hard concepts and make them so that people can understand them. So I have work to do, but I want to at least describe those 2 at the end to you so that you can see what you think. So that's my intention. I opened the article with this. There's a bunch of survey articles out there about product ops. One of the most popular, at least if you believe Google's SEO, is the Product School article, and which I thought was a kind of a totally useless article in the sense that it just says that product ops is different everywhere, and it's just a mess. So get used to it. And okay, well, you have to look a little deeper. I don't think it is different everywhere, but it's no question that there is not some sort of standard definition. But is that really surprising? We can't even agree on it as an industry about what the job of a product manager is. We can't even describe as an industry what we should call a product designer. So it's not that big a surprise, but it is frustrating. And one of the things that frustrates me about it, when I first heard the concept, I got all excited because you guys probably know the sort of derivation of the term is from DevOps. And DevOps, you may know, sort of Amazon was kind of the pioneer there, because before DevOps became a thing, we had something called site ops. And basically what almost all the internet companies did was the engineers would build their stuff. This is after we figured out hopefully what to build. They would build their stuff, but they were not allowed to deploy their software. They had to make requests, sometimes on bended knee, to the site ops people and say, please, will you please deploy this? And site ops were kind of they were the gatekeepers. And don't get me wrong, they played a very important job, because, if you broke the site, that's an outage. This is bad. And their job was to kind of keep the site running. Yet engineering's job is to get new stuff out there as fast as we can. Look, we're working on continuous deployment. We want to do multiple releases a day. This was major irritation to the site ops people. And so the engineers said, well, we need to fix this problem structurally. And they realized what we really need to do is, and I love this, as you can tell, my focus is very much on empowered product teams, is we need to give engineers tools so that they can safely deploy code into production. And I'm like, I love that. First of all, it is very empowering, because most teams, if you ask most product teams, even at great companies, what their biggest sources of grief was, they would often tell you their interactions with site ops. It was just very frustrating. So so empowering the engineers with tools to deploy themselves, that's awesome. And there was a very natural sort of leverage of that concept to design ops. So because, as many of you know, especially those of you that are current or been designers, there's a lot of production stuff in design. It's not usually runtime, it's discovery and delivery time, but it is, there's a lot of production assets that have to be done and a lot of manual stuff. And so the idea of providing tools for designers and front-end developers to be able to speed new designs into production is awesome. Love that. but product, so my hope when I heard people first start to utter product ops is that, okay, that's going to be great. We're going to provide product managers with real tools, not just tools to manage roadmaps and tools to manage, interviews, but I mean, real tools to help get product into production faster. But of course, first of all, product is not really about the tools, as you guys probably know. So it turns out product management is not so amenable to the original concepts of DevOps and even design ops. And so what that created, though, was it sort of created a placeholder. It let companies say, we know, I don't want to make it sound like grade school kids, but engineers have their DevOps and designers have their design ops. So a lot of product teams thought, well, we need our product ops. So they had a place, but then that begged the question, what is that really? And so anyway, I work with lots of companies and I meet lots of companies, especially, and I love that. And people started asking me, how do you define product ops? And I'm like, well, I mean, I can tell you what I like about what I think fits, but you tell me. And I started hearing all these different definitions of product ops. So I started asking people if you wouldn't mind, like write up a 1 paragraph, or if you need to, 1-page summary of how your company is defining product ops and send it to me, because I want to get a sense for what problem people want to solve with this new organizational structure. And the result was all over the place. Now, like I said, some I think are great. Some I think are understandable, but harmless. You know what I mean? They're like not going to really hurt or help anything one way or another. It's just a different, maybe a little sexier name. But, and then others I think are truly helpful. So now I'm going to go through those 6, but I will tell, that's always the question. You have to understand, I'm still, all the data I'm getting is anecdotal. And so I don't know for a fact, like what's the most prevalent definition. All I can kind of go with is what people talk about, the articles that are written, so I'm not sure. What I did is I prioritized these from what I think is most harmful to you to most beneficial to you. Now, I have theories about what's most common. And thankfully, I don't think this first one, the most harmful one, is the most common. But anyway, I'm still forming opinions about what is most prevalent. And obviously, at this point, I'm now trying to influence what's most prevalent. But at this point, it's just a lot of anecdotal discussions with a lot of different companies. I've got more than 50 companies emailed me their summary definition that they use internally. So I feel, and a lot of them are just different wording for the same thing. So I kind of took a while to group them into the 6 major definitions. I will also say I have heard others, a half a dozen others, but they seem so random that I thought they were just one-offs. And unless I heard several companies describing the same thing, I just consider it just a one-off, and so not interesting. So the 6 I'm describing are ones where there are many companies doing each of the 6. Like I said, I don't know how many in each really. And this is just what I've encountered so far. I fully expect over time I'll learn about others. Okay, so the first one is the one I consider this most damaging to an organization. And I won't read it to you, but basically this is exactly, pretty much word for word, the way the old school PMOs used to define their organization. And PMO, for those that don't know, this officially stands for Program Management Office. It's kind of it's a governance thing. It's much bigger in companies like the work for the Department of Defense, contractors for them. You're building something like a missile system, and there's all these regulations that have to be followed. And I have to be careful. There are good definitions of PMO as well. That a lot of companies like Apple, even Google, even Amazon have a number of people that are program managers that are extremely helpful, especially with their products that are mixes of hardware and software. So I'm not describing them. I'm talking about the old school command and control governance style. Like this, literally, the guy was describing to me, and there was more to it that was even more egregious, but long range planning, we are the planner. Like this guy went on to say, the way they've set up their organization is anytime a stakeholder has a request, it goes directly to them. They gatekeep on all the requests. They decide whether they forward a request onto a product team. So, you could tell I'm not describing here a modern product company. So this is the antithesis of what I would advocate and what I think good companies do. But I'm calling it out because, most of those companies, they know they can't call it PMO because it's a non-starter politically in the organization. But what these companies have found is that if they call it product ops, it's new life. So when a company tells me this is how they define product ops, I know we have bigger problems to solve. This is a sign of a much deeper issue. This is a sign of a cultural issue. I'm going to go, I said there were two deeper issues that all this is a consequence of, and I'm going to talk about that. One of them is very much, this is a consequence of that. So, okay, that's the one I think is most damaging, but is not all that common. But that's the first one I was trying to write about. When Jeff Bezos talks about being very careful as you get bigger, that process doesn't become the thing. That's what happens when process becomes the thing. Okay. This one is a much bigger issue. Much bigger issue. Yeah, Dan was talking about day one versus day two thinking. So what I just described, that is classic day two thinking. And that is exactly what you're trying to stay away from. All right. So this one, though, is a more common problem. And this has been, you guys know the game whack-a-mole, but I feel like I've been playing whack-a-mole with this problem almost my entire career. Interestingly, early on, it really wasn't a thing. There was a product manager, and that role was responsible for the full product management job. But starting, roughly 20 years ago, a lot of people started complaining that product management was too hard a job. It was too big a job. It was like too much. I don't want to, I don't want all that pressure. I don't want all that responsibility. And there were lots of creative ways of slicing the job in half. Now, it's really important that I have a distinction that I call out here between this model and the sixth model I'll talk about, because in this model, it's referred to as 2 in a box PM. So by the way, you've seen it if you've seen like processes like SAFe, which will have a product owner and a product manager, or companies sometimes would have an outbound product manager and an inbound product manager. Sometimes they would define it this way. They'd have a product manager that was responsible for managing stakeholders and a product owner who's responsible for talking to developers. Or it wasn't a product owner, even in non-agile places, it was a business analyst, a BA would talk to the developers, but the product manager would talk. But that's just another way of slicing it up. Sometimes in some companies, it was sliced up as product marketing, product management. That's not very common anymore, but that was one of the manifestations of this. But, by the way, another common way is to have a product manager and then an associate product manager, and they are teamed up. Like this definition is a classic example of, yeah, our product manager thinks the job is too big, and so he or she needs to like get an assistant, or whatever, a grunt to do all the little things that help that product manager. Now, this is a really complicated topic that that's the other one I want to talk about at the end. This idea of splitting the job is a really nuanced topic. There is some very legitimate concerns about the scope of the product job that a lot of companies They ask the product manager to also be a project manager. In many cases, they're asking them also to do product marketing. It's just insane. In a lot of places, they don't actually have a real designer. All they have is a graphic designer. So the product manager also needs to be user researcher, also needs to be interaction designer. Unfortunately, this is a common issue. Sometimes they have to be QA. It goes on and on. So it's not that surprising that in many companies, there'd just be people would say, uncle, too much. Stop. Let me split the job up. And the latest incarnation of that is, oh, well, we have a product ops manager that is my partner. But you have to realize that the model that's bad that I'm talking about is when it's basically one-to-one. Every product manager has their junior pal product ops manager that they split the job with. That's the anti-pattern I'm talking about here as the second most serious problem. Now, there's a whole discussion that I'm going to get to about why is it so bad to split up the product role? And obviously, in terms of work-life balance, it's great. But in terms of actually succeeding as a true product manager on an empowered product team, there are very serious consequences, especially to innovation. Let me just say at this point that what makes a strong product manager successful is connecting customers, the different parts of our business, and our engineers. The last thing you want to do structurally in your company is cut that person in half. It's the last thing you want to do. It makes the chance of innovation go way down. I'm going to say more about that. I just wanted to point this out because having your team of full product managers that have a resource, shared people that you can go to and say, I need help with user research. I need help with some data analysis. I need help with some tool purchase. That's great. Of course, we've had that forever. It's very helpful, but that is empowering to a product manager. Slicing their job in half is disempowering. So this is an extremely important but nuanced topic. So I just want to point out the problem here is when you take one job, a strong, empowered product team, product manager, and try to slice it in half. That's the problem. Okay. So that's the second issue. Those first two, I consider they are way more damaging to your company and to your customers than helpful. The third one is also very damaging, but it's more of a long-term damage rather than a short-term damage. This is referred to, or I refer to this as the delegated product leader model. So in this idea, the truth is, and I understand where this one comes from, that's why I wrote the book Empowered, honestly, where the book Empowered was actually written for leaders, product leaders, which means the managers of product management, product design, and engineering. I wrote it for them because so many of them have no clue. They've never been trained in what their job really is. They've never worked at a good product company. I mean, that's hard enough even for the individual contributors, but for the leaders, it's got a lot of consequence. And so we have this real problem in our industry of strong product leaders. And when you don't have strong product leaders, it's kind of understandable that they delegate to this other group. They're essentially delegating. If you look at the way this company that does this defined it, and by the way, this is a quite common problem. They are saying, okay, our managers focus on the HR stuff. And instead, when it comes to vision, when it comes to strategy, when it comes to training, onboarding, coaching, we lean on our product ops team. They do that for us. Now, at one level, it's like, well, that's better than nobody doing it. If you could actually staff the product ops with, let's say, you know, in your company, you are a medium-sized company, and what you really need are 5 strong director level product management leaders. And you only have 1. That's it. You know, the other people have no clue. They're just HR management at best. Well, this is one way to kind of get the most out of that one. You're kind of centralizing. So, and this is why this is less toxic than the first 2, because it's not like there aren't some benefits to that. The problem is more of a long-term issue, because that product director cannot provide the level of personal coaching to every one of the product managers that is needed. So yeah, can they set up an onboarding class? Sure. Can they maybe do some kind of training? Sure. But can they do the kind of one-on-one intense coaching where, like, this is what a good manager, director, VP of product does. They sit down with that product manager no less than every week. They talk about what are the problems you're tackling in discovery this week? What are the risks? How are you addressing those risks? And a lot of times the person will say, I've never tackled this kind of problem. I've heard there's a different kind of prototype for this. I'm still figuring out, can you teach me what to do here? How to handle this? That's how good people actually learn product. That's the truth. Books are great. I write books. Training is great. I occasionally do training, but the way good people really learn it is not any of those. It's one-on-one coaching with a competent, strong manager. And this won't provide that. So that's why this is more of a longer-term corrosive problem. If the real issue is that your leaders don't know how to do their job, that's the thing you have to fix. There's just no way around it. That's what you have to fix. All right, so that's the third problem. The next 2 are, and I could see some questions coming by for each of these. How do you fix that? How do you address it? Which, I mean, the short answer is, that's why I wrote a 400-page book to try to explain that. You know, these are not small things to change and fix, but we'll talk more of this for sure at the end and in the Q&A. The next 2, though, are a little different. These 2 are not harmful, in my opinion. There's little things that you can like pick at, which I'll mention, but they're really, I think these 2 may be net positives. I'm not sure where they lay out, but they're understandable. They're understandable. These are not, but both of these 2 sort of models of product ops are really just rebranding. In this one, you know, and first of all, what I'm about to say does not apply to every kind of product, but many kinds of products have a big runtime operations role. So where, you know, just keeping the product running is not easy. I gave an example in that article about a publishing application where it needs daily sort of care and feeding in order to keep things running. Could a product manager do that? Sure. In a small company, sure. But as products get, you know, thousands, millions of users, a lot of times this becomes a much bigger responsibility. Now, this has always been weird as far as title. Some companies call it production operations, literally production, the product in production operations. But a lot of companies would call it a product analyst, or they would make up a term, just make up something. But it's not a product manager job. They don't have a team of engineers, so they're not product managers in any sense, really, of any of the sort of classic senses. But it is valuable. And one of the things that those companies that have, I mean, imagine a product like Airbnb or Uber or, you know, where there's a lot of production operations responsibilities. Yeah, eBay actually had quite a bit of this. In a lot of products, you have that. And so it's not a very glamorous job to recruit for. And I can relate to this problem because I've had to staff for it. It's like, yeah, well, it's kind of a weird job, but it's really, you'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot about running businesses that are powered by technology. You'll get exposed to things. There's some technology there. There's some customer service there. There's some QA there. There's all these different dimensions. So it just wasn't very appealing to recruit for. And I found several companies that have said, well, their answer to that is production operations becomes product operations, product ops. And it's you can't blame them for grabbing that nomenclature. It's a beautiful fit for them. The only thing is this is not what most people out there think when you say product ops. They think they're more helping the product management side of the equation, but they're really not. If anything, they're helping the customer service or customer success side of the equation. You can maybe call it customer success ops or something, but anyway, all I'm doing here is observing that several companies have rebranded their production operations to product operations. And other than confusing some people on a LinkedIn profile, I don't really see any problem with that. If a company wants to do that in order to recruit more people to this important role, that's all right. I mean, obviously the product side of me wants to just fix the product, so there isn't so much of this runtime obligation. But sometimes, no matter how good the product is, there are certain things that just are not amenable to this kind of automation. All right. So anyway, that's just a rebranding one. I don't consider that a problem. The last, or not the last one, the next to last one is another rebranding. And I really have a lot of sympathy for this one because there's more politics involved in this one. This is a rebranding of product marketing managers. Now, the reason this is this is even a thing is because, hopefully you guys know product marketing is super hard job. It is really a hard job. It's got a lot harder over the last 10 years. As we've moved to things like continuous deployment, as we've really embraced go-to-market technology and using product techniques for go-to-market, it has got to be it's turned into a much more complicated job. And it was pretty hard even before. And one of the challenges is I know what I'm about to say is a little sensitive, but many people with the product marketing job title today, they're like, I don't want to do all that. It's a big leap to embrace all that stuff. And in some companies, they've just trained their product marketing people to do this. They've had to, especially, by the way, if you have a direct sales organization. This is a really critical role. In other companies, they're like, look, the truth is we need more technical product marketing people. And we need to make this job more appealing to a very high caliber person, very much along the lines of, the kind of caliber in a true product manager position. So the idea here is product marketing group would rename or rebrand to product ops. And I should say some companies just rebranded to product ops to be able to recruit more, but other companies made it a new group. In other words, they left product marketing alone. They said, you do the sales training, that keeps you busy, that's important. We'll staff product ops that does all of this much more, much more product-like. There's a lot of test and learn, constant test and learn. There's a lot more integrating and assimilating the data from all the channels. So there's a lot more product-like stuff. So they're kind of turned it into another job that's complementary to product marketing. And that's because of the politics, right? If you have to go to your head of product marketing and say, you're not doing the job you need to do, we need to up-level all your people, that's a rough conversation. Some companies have had that. I know I've participated in those conversations in some cases, but in other companies, they're like, well, there's so much work to do with it, especially if you have a direct sales force. Let's keep that small product marketing group. Let them focus on the sort of last mile sales enablement activities. And let's have this new group, product ops, do this sort of hands-on, very modern, very intense product marketing. So that's, again, I don't really, other than maybe some ruffled feathers politically in an organization where the product marketing people might sometimes feel that their turf is infringed upon, it's doing really critical work well. And so you gotta like that. So this is one of those things. When I find a company with this model, to me, that's more good than bad. That's definitely more good than bad. That's not just rebranding. What it really is saying is that we're also doubling our investment in this. It's taking it seriously. So I think this is helpful. And it wouldn't bother me in the least if this became the modern definition of product ops. Because I do think it would really help beef up. It's just that I think the next definition I'll talk about would be an even more valuable if somebody's going to grab the title product ops. I kind of hope even more that it's this next one. All right. So the sixth one then is my favorite version. Is I refer to. And by the way, I've sort of coined all these names because everybody was calling their stuff product ops. So that didn't suit my purposes. I needed a name for each one that was distinct. So I just made this stuff up. But I refer to this as the force multiplier model to emphasize that that's what they're doing. You're really empowering product managers. In truth, these people are empowering product teams. They're empowering designers and engineers as well, but especially product managers. Now, you might notice that this is these three parts are already in most good companies. They're already there. Almost every good company I know. The first two for sure, and the third one, it depends how big they are. So let me call out what this is, first of all. And just so you see what I'm saying, when I describe this, I'm describing a model where there's a head of product that has product management, product design, which is pretty typical already, but now has a third component, at least logically, that is product ops. And that product ops has three different skill sets. And then, by the way, there are three very different skill sets. So the first one is basically your user research team. Most companies that I know already have, as part of their UX team, they have obviously interaction designers, some visual designers, sometimes combo designers there, of course, and they usually have some number of user researchers. So this is not a new thing. In fact, a lot of the companies that we know and love, whether it's Google or others, have had user research teams for literally 30 years. So this is anything but new. But I am suggesting that it would be valuable to the company and to those user researchers to consider moving them on the org chart into product ops rather than as buried as part of UX. Now, the truth is, I have to pick my battles, as all you do have to do as well. I want to make sure we have user researchers. That's the main battle. If the company says they have user researchers, but it's over here, I'm like, oh, it's okay as long as it's there. Because I really am a big believer in the power of user research, and especially in enabling product managers and product teams to make good decisions based on qualitative insights. I love that. So the higher order point is just to have those people. The secondary point is, well, how can we really give them a seat at the table? How can we give them more visibility? And I think this helps. Similarly, for many years, companies have had almost as long, like at Google, almost as long has had data insights team. They're sometimes called data analysts, but they are there to help you answer questions with data. So the qualitative user researchers are there to help you answer questions qualitatively, and a data team help you answer questions quantitatively. You all know most of your companies have people, they can help you interpret the analytics. They can help you craft an appropriate A/B test and what the right constraints are for that test to get a good quality response, how long it will take, what level of risk, all of these dimensions. This is what they do. To me, modern product requires both of those. Absolutely non-negotiable, requires qualitative and quantitative insight support. If it's a true startup of 10 people, then obviously the product manager and the product designer are just going to have to cover this themselves, usually do. But as a company grows, having even a small user research team and a small data insights team gets huge leverage. And I'm one of those people telling the CEOs, you got to hire a team now. It can only be 2 people if you want, but it's going to be really powerful. Now, and the third one, so the first 2 have been around in most companies. My bet is most of your companies already have these people. It's just a question of let's give them a more visible, more impactful seat at the table. The third is tools and best practices. So this is, let's say you've got 50 product managers in your company. 50 product managers. That's a good number of product managers. It's like medium size. But, at that point, do you really want every product manager deciding what road mapping tool you want or deciding whatever you're going to use? Maybe it just makes sense to have one of the most, and this is often what happens, even before product ops, one of the leaders will ask one of the senior product people, especially if you have, I'm a big fan of principal product managers. I love that role. The principal is like way higher than a senior, is a very prestigious role. In some companies, in most companies, they're paid between a director and a VP level product. So it's a very prestigious role. But going to one of those principal product managers and saying, hey, would you mind, we know we need to standardize on this tool, super common. Can you go and choose what you think is the best one for our organization? Makes total sense. Or to go to that person and say, we're putting together an onboarding program for new product managers. Can you help us with that? Makes total sense. But I want you to notice something. And the reason I'm calling this out is because quite a few companies that I asked to tell me their definition, they had this definition, but they were staffing this role with junior people. And I'm like, wait a minute, I don't understand. You're having your most junior people decide what your most senior people are going to do? Does that make any sense at all? All you're going to do is lower the quality of your people. That's going to go exactly in the wrong direction. It's like, no, this role needs to be among your best people. So I want to make sure that's clear, that we're talking about, this is a super strong person. I love for this team either a principal product manager or principal designer or both. And it is, again, very prestigious role. Good. So those are the 3 components. Now, the first time I saw it packaged this way was in Melissa Perry's book, Escaping the Build Trap. At the end of her book, she talks about that's the model of product ops she likes. Interestingly, I hadn't even heard from any of the companies told me they had it until I first read about it in hers. And I'm like, I like that too. I want to meet some more companies that have that model. And it seems like, well, between her and me and hopefully others, will get more people to embrace this model. Anecdotally, I haven't found that many companies yet using the model. I know lots of companies that have those 3 individual components scattered in their company, but pulling it together under the umbrella product ops, that's what's newer. And I love that. So I would love to see that grow, because I believe this really does help empower product teams. You want to make sure that every one of your product teams has access to experts that can help them with making decisions on data, that can help them with making decisions qualitatively, in other words, with customers, especially face-to-face, and that can help them make good choices in terms of tools and best practices, methods, new techniques. So that's that's the sixth model. I'm just calling that the force multiplier model. Now, the big caveat with that one is making sure. I have found some places that I think they saw in her book, the 3 pillars. And what they did is they took the second problem, which was the 2 in a box, and they put all of those product ops people that partner with product managers into that group. And they made a huge product ops group, which is not this. That just looks like this on an org chart, but is not this. All right. Okay, so those are the, I see there's a boatload of questions, but I've been trusting Dan's been looking through these, and we'll get to them in a minute. I have only, seen a few noticed a few come by, but I wanted to at least mention to you, I do think there are 2 very dangerous forces, sort of dark forces at work that really do plague weak organizations. And they pop up anytime they can. They're just always sort of ready to pounce if you give them a chance. And I wanted to kind of get these out on the table. I really do think these are serious problems. These are not little, these are serious. The whole products op discussion is noise compared to these. They're just symptoms of these problems when people mess up on them. So I want to get these out. And also, like I said, I'm still looking for the right examples and the right words to really convey just how serious these 2 problems are. The first one, broad problem. There are essentially 2 ways to deal with growing an organization that I see out there. One is to try to scale with process, and the other is to try to scale with leaders, with people. And they are 2 very different schools of thought. I actually think they are 2 very different cultures. I know too many companies in both buckets, but I especially know too many that think they can scale with process. In fact, if I had to point to one root issue, and we, as you guys probably know, all over the world, but especially outside of Silicon Valley, all over the world, there are these massive transformation initiatives going on, digital transformation, whatever you want to call it. The whole idea is they want to move from running like, your favorite bank or your favorite IT organization to running like an Amazon or something. And this is usually the root of the problem. Everything else is a symptom. The root of the problem is that they thought the way they would grow is with process, and they would put in process. This, by the way, is exactly what Bezos was warning about when he talked about day 2 organizations, but he also had been around the block enough to know this is a really constant force. It is a constant force. Anytime, actually, so Amazon has been very vocal about this. One of the books that came out last year that I just loved was the book from Reed Hastings, No Rules Rules, the co-founder of Netflix. And Netflix sets the bar on empowered teams even higher than Amazon. I mean, they're all the way, set the dial all the way. And anyway, he says, he basically opens the book saying, this is what's wrong with most companies. A mistake is made. Mistakes happen everywhere. But in these kind of companies with these kind of cultures, they say, well, what process can we introduce so this mistake never happens again? Fast forward 2 years. Company's now 2 years old, 3 years old. You've got a bureaucracy. Nobody wants to work there. It sucks the soul out of the organization. And so it is, it's brutal. And that's what they do. They think they can scale with process. Any of you have had to work with things like SAFe. SAFe is an example of that. StageGate is an example of that. They're not all that different, by the way. That's what you do. You try to scale with process. So this is a fundamental issue versus the way good companies believe that's not how you scale. It's like the way you scale with strong leaders, because the way you scale is you get more leaders who commit to developing and coaching their people to become strong. It's a very different philosophy. It's a very different culture. But if you're in the camp that believes that you want to scale with process, then when you see something like product ops, you immediately go to either the first thing I described, let's make process the king here again. That's what the PMO is. Or let's just take a difficult job and try to make these different processes that can try to cover it. That's the two in a box issue that I'm going to talk about next. All right, so this is a serious issue. And the other dark force is that one I alluded to before, splitting the product manager's job. Now, I mentioned a little bit of this before. I just wanted, this is such an ongoing issue in our industry. Of course, I should have said this right at the first minutes when Dan introduced me, but everything I talk about is about empowered product teams. If you're a feature team, I don't even know why you need to split the product manager job, because the product manager job on a feature team is much more of a project manager. So you already have a much lesser job. I don't even have a lot of sympathy for you workload there. I do have sympathy for a real product manager in a product team where you are responsible, and just hopefully everybody knows this, it listens to my stuff at least, but product manager in a real product team is while the designer is responsible for usable solution and the engineers are responsible for a feasible solution, the product manager is responsible for making sure we have a viable and a valuable solution. And that's extremely hard, no question. However, it's not as hard as it is in a lot of companies. In other words, you should not be responsible for QA. You should not be responsible for project management. You should not be responsible for product design. You need to have designers. So I'm not saying that job, as it's done in a lot of companies, shouldn't be split. It should. But once you pull those things that are not product away, and now we're focusing just on value and viability, don't cut that job. Because like I said, the way it works is that you are bringing together the knowledge of the enabling technology, the business constraints, and I mean a lot of business constraints, just to be clear, go-to-market constraints, marketing, sales, service, provisioning, cost constraints, monetization, privacy, security. This is what viability means. Your job as a product manager is to come up with a solution that's viable. And the last thing you want to do is literally cut the person who can bring those together into two people. So now the engineers talk to one person who mostly focuses on a backlog, and another, and then sales and marketing and customers and other business constraints focus on this other person. So, we need to really make clear how damaging it is to cut that job once it's already to the right level. So those are the two forces. I want to talk a lot more in the future about those two those two dynamics. But I talked longer than I meant to. Dan, I thought I'd be able to go faster with that because I do want to make sure we talk about questions that you might have. But let me pause there and let's open it up.
That sounds great. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Well, I had people have been doing questions. We have John, our volunteers, capturing them in a Google Doc. So we'll be capturing. There's a lot of questions, so we'll capture them. We'll do that. And I thought while he's doing that, we could have a brief fireside chat to build on some of the points or some of the things you brought up. So thanks. First off, thanks for a great talk.